Welcome back to Subject to Cross. I'm your host, Caroline Donato.
Oh, and I'm your co-host, Pete Kratza.
That's where Pete does his thing where he's like, oh, I'm a host. I'm a host too.
I don't want to be a host. Never wanted to be a host.
Pete wants to be the perpetual guest.
Correct.
But guess what, Pete? We already have a guest today.
Whoa.
Who's our guest?
Our guest is Mary Lawrence, who works with us. At least she does for now. How long have you worked with us?
Since May.
May. She said that like all chipper.
Because she's happy.
Are you really happy?
Yeah.
Oh, good. That's good to know.
Well, Mary, welcome to the podcast. Pete and I have been doing this forever. And
when did we start?
2018?
Really?
2019?
Wow.
It's definitely a year before the pandemic.
Okay.
And it's kind of nice because we have not podcasted in a while. We're sorry, listenership. It's been a wild ride. We've been really busy, but our listeners still send in questions. People still ask for it, and here we are. And we promised a guest. So who better to start with than Mary Lawrence, who works directly with us every single day.
It's a lot of pressure. I apologize in advance, Mary.
It's fine. I can live with it.
All right.
And before we get into the questions for Mary, she asked me yesterday, this cracked me up. I texted you this. You didn't find it as funny as I do. But she said, are you and Pete going to roast me? And I said, why would we? What do you mean roast? And she said, you guys roast each other. And I'm like, well.
Yeah, no, I'm not comfortable roasting Mary yet. And I don't know that I'll ever get there, Mary. Caroline deserves to be roasted. I haven't seen that you deserve to be roasted.
And Pete
yet.
is like an easy moving target. It's like shooting fish in a barrel for a roast, you know?
Well, you know I stay in my lane as often as possible.
That's, what is it, a rock? Caught between a rock and a hard place. That's what Mary is.
Yes.
And what are we? Who's the rock and who's the hard place?
You're definitely the hard place.
Okay. Mary, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about your background?
Okay. Well, I'm a Chester County native. I grew up here in town. I went to Henderson High School, Penn State for undergrad, and Drexel for law school.
When did you graduate law school?
In May of 2021.
So you're a recent graduate.
Yes, recent grad.
And you said you're a native from this area. You wanted to stay in this area?
I didn't think so initially, but after living in Philadelphia through the pandemic, I thought it was a safe place to come back to.
That sounds nice.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to live in Philadelphia. No offense to Philadelphia.
I couldn't imagine being in my 700 square foot apartment during that pandemic.
Oh, yeah, I forgot you lived in it. Yeah, you didn't want to leave Philadelphia, did you?
No, I loved it until I got in that car accident, and then I couldn't stand driving the distance.
Caroline and Ray had us over. I think it was like my wife and I, and was it
Duke and Kim?
And it was the apartment was very well appointed.
It was in Fittler Square, looking
it had
over
a nice
the river.
View. I've never felt so claustrophobic.
What?
It was so small, and I can only imagine the rent that you two were paying.
It was reasonable.
Well, I don't want to know.
And
what
might
was.
I add, you were there for a cocktail and appetizers, then we went out to dinner. So it's not like
Right.
you were.
It was very small.
The ceilings were high.
Okay, I'll give you that.
Anyway, back to Mary.
Yeah, really.
Jeez, Pete, stay on track. So how is it that you came to work with us?
Oh, funny story, Caroline. Well, I was interning at the Chester County DA's office, and I liked that job. But
That's a very nice answer.
Don't interrupt our guest. This is why we don't have guests.
Go ahead, Mary.
I really liked that job, but I wanted to have options when I graduated, and graduating during a pandemic is a little bit stressful because I didn't know who was hiring or what was going on. So I'm talking to my mother, Alita Rovito, about this, and she suggests, why don't you meet up with Caroline Donato? She does criminal defense. I know you want to stay in criminal, so go see what else you can do and who you can talk to. So I had lunch with Caroline, and I was like, I want to work for her. So I harassed her until she decided to hire me.
Well, I remember it.
Sounds familiar.
Well, okay, we can touch upon that in a second. I remember it a little differently. Mary actually, your mom, who's now Judge Ravito, which is very cool, she and I had a case together. Your mom's was a family law judge. And when we started working on that case together, she told me about you. This was, I think, before you were at the Chester County DA's office. Do you remember meeting me for lunch?
Yeah, I do.
And she said, can you talk to my daughter and kind of help her figure out which way to go in terms of criminal law? And what'd I tell you?
I don't remember.
I told you to do both.
Oh.
I said, do prosecution work, do defense work, and then you'll figure out where you're more comfortable in terms of what feels better, where you find your value. And you did that, and then we started working on that case together.
Yeah,
remember
because
that?
I did research for my mom, and this is how I knew Caroline would be tolerable as a boss, because I did research in a manner that is appropriate for my mom, which is she just wants the law, she'll do everything else. And I did a memo on, I think it was parental alienation, or it was on
child competency.
Oh, yeah, child competency. And I sent it to Caroline, and she calls me. And she tells me that this is a good start, but it needs to start with an intro, do the review of the law, have an analysis, and a conclusion.
Well, I said, what's your opinion?
And that led you to believe she was going to be tolerable?
Well, in my mind, I was like, oh my God, I just did this whole thing completely wrong. Like, this was incorrect. And she told me how to do it right, and she was nice about it.
See that, Pete?
Must be my influence.
Yes, you're why I'm so nice.
Yeah.
No, Mary gave me law, and I
Well,
said,
I wouldn't say you're nice. I just soften you.
okay.
Yeah.
Mary gave me law, and I said, well, what's your opinion? Like, where do you come out on this? And she said, you want my opinion? I said, yeah. What's your opinion? And she goes, oh, okay. And then she went back, and she finished that memo, and you're really good. And then she did take me to lunch, and she's like, I figured out which I want to do out of prosecution and defense. I said, what? And she's like, I want to work for you. Mm. I said, we have no openings. And then she wrote a nice cover letter, and then it's just, you're a great fit for the firm.
Yeah,
Thanks.
absolutely. What exactly drew you to defense work as opposed to prosecution work?
Well, after having done both, based on Caroline's suggestion, I just felt more comfortable in defense work. I liked prosecution work. It was an enjoyable job. I liked the experience I had. But I worked for another firm before coming here doing criminal defense. And my boss there was like, you get so many more opportunities to be creative in criminal defense. He's like, you have to look at things upside down, backwards, forwards, any way you can look at it. And I like doing that more.
I didn't know you did that. Do I know? You don't have to name the lawyer, but do I know the lawyer?
Yeah, Steve Patrizio.
Oh, that's right. Yes, I did know that. And I did read your resume, by the way, before we hired you. I don't retain things like I used to. But I completely agree with Steve. I think that there is room for creativity. And that doesn't mean that you're playing with the facts. You're playing loose with the facts, but you have to be able to look at things differently. And with apologies to my prosecutor friends, I still have a couple, I think that they tend to look at things definitely more black and white, not look outside the box, so to speak. And sometimes that's a tough transition for a prosecutor to make from when they start as a prosecutor to becoming a defense attorney. But I think that's really sage advice by Steve Patrizio to you.
The other thing you shared with me is that when you were doing defense work, you really felt like you were helping people. Because a lot of what we're doing is rehabilitative work, trying to help someone who might be culpable for the crime, avoid reoffending or avoid being in that dangerous situation again that would put them in a position to be charged with a crime. And you shared with me, I feel like I'm helping people when I'm doing criminal defense, which feels good.
Yeah, I definitely like having a client to work for and like knowing them and knowing their background and everything else that goes into them as a person versus what they've been accused of it really, like, you care about this person and you want to help them, even if there is exposure and culpability.
That's a really, I never thought about it that way, but that's insightful. I agree with that. Wow, this is very serious, the guest thing.
Okay, well, let me get to your question.
I like having guests, but I can't make fun of you as much when we have a guest.
I mean, jump right in.
And my chair's squeaking, by the way.
Is that your chair or mine?
Yeah, it's mine.
Yeah, it is yours, because I just tried.
I can't move the rest of the time here.
Well, let me ask you Pete's question, because Pete and I went out to lunch to put some framework together to our podcast session today.
Oh, I want to ask the question.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, who do you like more?
Oh, God.
You don't have to answer
rolling
the question.
my eyes.
You don't have to
And we're
answer the
both
question.
staring at her.
Yes.
We have
Eagerly.
this. It's like my kids with our cats. Like, who does Josie love more, right? It's the same thing with you and me and Donna. I tell you all the time that Donna likes me a lot more than she likes you.
I also don't ask for that kind of affirmation the way you do. Pete's
maybe
always
you're right.
like, Pete's always
So
like,
you're saying I'm insecure?
I don't know what you are, but you're the one who really needs to pit us together and see who the popularity contest is with. And what are people supposed to say to you?
What do you mean?
You think someone's supposed to say, Pete, it's not you?
Well, no, I expect honesty. If you like Caroline more, that's fine with me.
I think we
won't work together anymore, but that's fine.
You'll
with
get
me.
fired, but
Great.
By the way, never call me your boss. I told Caroline that from the outset. We work together. Work for me.
Oh my gosh, Pete, something Mary does is what I used to do to you all the time. She'll text me like, I got caught up doing this morning. I'll be in by 9:30. I'm so sorry. I'm like, you don't have to tell me that. Remember, I used to do that to you all the time.
I would be like, I don't care.
It was different.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the way that you were persistent with Caroline, she was similar. Similar backstory in terms of how she came to practice criminal defense at MacElree Harvey. But we have talked about that in a prior episode.
Do you know what our colleague told me the other day?
What?
Because I thought I was pretty. I mean, I was actually genuinely interested in business law. Come on. Well, no, I was. I was branching
whatever.
out. I was just trying to expand my
It's
horizons.
like Mary likes family law. Go ahead.
Mary does like family law. Mary
I
likes
love
all
everything.
law.
Yeah. See, exactly.
She's better at that than me.
Okay.
But when I was hired as a business attorney, and you wouldn't even let me in your office.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, let me just poke around. Let me handle a case for a while. You really turned me down. But one of our colleagues brought up to me the other day that it was no secret to anybody in the firm that I was a criminal defense lawyer. Because when I passed the bar and we had that party, remember your party for passing the bar?
Yeah.
They would have the shareholders talk about the new associates, but then the associate would get to talk back then. And so I gave a speech. I don't remember my speech, but our colleague does. And he said I stood up and thanked everyone and was really happy to be at the firm and was excited to try business, even though my entire background is criminal defense and my whole passion has always been criminal defense.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, I was that straightforward? He goes, yeah, you didn't really hide the ball.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you are straightforward.
But that's probably where the dynamic has shifted. We wanted you, Mary, in our practice. Pete did not want me in the practice.
That's sweet.
I
didn't.
wouldn't say didn't want you. I was just concerned that we were going to be able to, to grow it. And to Caroline's credit, more so than me, frankly, it has grown. And it'll continue to grow with you, I'm confident.
Absolutely. When I was talking to you on Penn's campus studying for the bar, I didn't go to Penn, but I studied for the bar at Penn. And I told you, when you told me about that opening in the business department, I was like, well, I do criminal defense. Don't you do criminal defense? And you're like, yeah, but I'm like a lone wolf.
Yeah, well, that's how most criminal defense lawyers are wired.
And I said, well, why don't you let me come work with you? And you're like, maybe you can do some work with me in like 5 or 6 years. In 5 or 6 years, I was his law partner.
Wow.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you'll do the same, Mary. But it'll be easier for you because we want you.
Mm-hmm.
Now look at you, Pete. You have a whole team.
You have a whole team.
How about that?
What a beautiful thing. Who do you like working with better?
This is the same question with different words.
Look, she wants an answer. I pose
get-
the questions as a joke.
I get different work from both of you. Pete's like, write this motion, and then I write the motion, and it gets turned in. And Caroline's like, write me a memo of law, then draft the motion, and then come back down for feedback, and then redo it, and then come back down for a third
I
edit,
think she answered the question.
and then turn it in. And I like both because I value the feedback, though. Like, I want to learn, and she teaches me.
Okay.
So I get different work from both of you.
Right.
What have you learned in your last several months of doing criminal defense? What has stuck out to you as the biggest thing you're learning?
About criminal defense or just law in general?
Both.
Well, I think the biggest thing is that, like, I think now I can probably figure anything out because I had no idea. It's very palpable when you start practicing law how much you know, how much you don't know. It's really just thrown in your face how little you know about the law. And so I think that just starting practicing and getting feedback and doing assignments has shown me that, like, any problem I can figure out. It just might take some hand-holding, maybe a little pushing.
Yeah, I think there's a pretty, would that be called a steep learning curve? Like you get up to speed pretty quickly. I do think that law school is much more practical now than when I went to law school back in the olden days. But the fact that once you start practicing, you can pick it up pretty quickly.
Yeah. Well, I also did about 1.5 years of law school online. So I felt like I was a little set back from actual practice.
I would have loved to have done law school online.
I could see you just sitting in your bed with a box of Doritos.
Ew, Doritos.
Caps around you.
You know what I've rediscovered?
Coca-Cola.
Cheez-Its.
You've rediscovered Cheez-Its?
Yeah, I hadn't had Cheez-Its in decades. They're really good.
Ray gets them from the grocery store every single week.
Yeah, they're good.
I know.
Even the white cheddar ones.
No, those are
Maybe
too
they
dirty
can
on the
sponsor
hands.
us. Cheez-Its.
I like the extra toasty.
Well, no, I wouldn't be eating Doritos in bed. You don't know me well enough. I'm fastidious.
Yeah,
I
but
would
I'm thinking
never
of you in
eat
law
bed.
school. There's something to me in my mind. Back then, you were a little sloppier.
No, I was immature. I'm much more mature now, Mary. I mean, I didn't like it. I would have loved to have just done it virtually. Would have been great.
So you would have gotten yourself in, a button-up shirt, khaki pants, sat at your kitchen
Don't
table.
put words in my mouth. I wouldn't be eating Doritos in bed. I might go to class in bed, but I wouldn't be eating while doing it.
Okay.
All right, we're come on.
Anyway, what have you learned the most about criminal defense?
I think I learned the most about mitigation. I did not know. So I've done mock trials since I was in high school, and that is all practice courtroom. You practice putting on the case. It's trial. What I had no idea about was the negotiation and what do you do with your facts? What do you learn about your client to help mitigate the exposure that they may have?
The criminal exposure.
The criminal exposure, yes.
So you see how heavy a role the good facts, that's what mitigation means, good facts about the individual client might play to negotiating an advantageous outcome.
Yes. I remember I was doing a traffic case, and I'm like, Caroline, what do I do? And she was like, you learn all the great facts about the client, and then you go and you talk to the officer and see what you can do.
Yeah.
And it worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
We see the good in people, Mary.
Yeah.
We really do.
Mm-hmm.
What has surprised you the most about practicing law and or criminal defense?
Oof. I think the most surprising thing has to be, I still think I'm on this like up curve of learning all the time. And so I feel constantly that I'm just like, oh my gosh, I don't know anything. And I feel like I know a little bit about a lot of things, but not a lot about anything. So I'm surprised at just how much is out there to really like learn and figure out.
And it's constant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the key is to learn it. I mean, there are a lot of people that do what we do that just scratch the surface and frankly don't practice criminal defense very well. But, there's always room to learn. There's always room to look at things from a different perspective. And that's one thing I've learned from the team approach is that it's very helpful to have different perspectives on a case or on an issue. I mean, I'm always right, but it's no. But I mean, it's nice. No, seriously, when you look at something, when you have somebody looking at something differently, it can be really the linchpin to a defense, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was quite a statement. I think I've actually had, I don't roast you, Mary, but we're always very straightforward with each other. Mary will come down at the end of the day with I'll have more edits for something, or can you look at this portion of this case law a different way, or reframe this issue a different way? And I'll look at her face and I'll say, is your brain melted today? Are we done? And she'll be like, yeah. I'll like, go home.
Do you notice that a lot of other people give you that look?
What look?
You're melding their brains?
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
One time I went into Caroline's office at the end of the day, and she's like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah. She's like, your eyes are glazed over. You should go home.
Yeah, I told her to leave.
I tell her to leave all the time.
Mary or me?
You.
Oh. I leave.
Not because I'm sick of you, because you need to go home.
Well, to be sick of me, you'd also have to be in the office just as much.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Okay, last question that I can think of. What do you like about practicing law the most?
Wow,
Or criminal defense. What do you like the most about it? We've talked about what you've learned, what has surprised you. Who do you like better? Who do you like working with better?
Those questions were unanswered. Although I think she leaned towards you in terms of
I got a
working
nod.
with. Yeah,
I got a
I'm going to
nod.
give you that one.
She
Yeah.
gives me more to do.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
I like being a part of your team. I was very thrilled when my persistence paid off, and when I passed the bar, I was like, oh my gosh, I really hope they keep me. So yeah, I like being a part of the team. I like the work that we're doing together. And I like that I can work on big, important cases that I would never see as a brand new graduate, and just help out in the background, but still be a part of something, and get experience as we go along.
And you're doing other things too at MacElree Harvey. You're practicing in other areas, right?
Oh yes, I dabble.
Yeah, well, I think, Caroline and I have had this conversation. You can, regardless of whether you want to be exclusively or primarily a criminal defense lawyer, you learn, you can borrow from other areas of the law, the way you approach cases, for instance, and that can assist you in the practice of criminal defense. Plus, it's always nice to once in a while take a break and do something that that isn't criminal defense, I think, anyway.
Yeah, so
unless it's family law. I don't like family law.
I mean, I've been saying this forever. My experience in the business department, even though it was short-lived, that experience that Pat Scott gave me, Harry DiDonato gave me, is invaluable. That is what helps me put together mitigation packets. That's what helps me put together certain creative ways to resolve a case that most defense lawyers might not think about. So that's why I tell Mary, you gotta just, and you might like something else too. You never know.
Haven't found it yet.
Well, Mary, what'd you think of your first podcast experience?
It was nice. Not a roast, as I was expecting. Honestly, I was listening to another episode a few days ago in preparation. I was like, oh gosh, what are they going to ask me? Because they really do just dig at each other the whole time.
What do you think people think of that?
I don't know. Do they think we don't like each other?
No.
Oh, okay.
It comes off very loving.
Oh.
But we're like, no, we don't like say that directly.
Whenever we're nice to each other, we'll be like, okay, that's it.
It's too much.
Gross.
Don't be
Talk
nice
to you in
me.
5 days.
Yeah, right.
Don't look at me in the eyes.
Yeah, right.
All right. Well, that's it for this episode of Subject to Cross. We're going to put out a bunch of them. Pete and I are in the studio this afternoon for quite some time. I'm concerned that you didn't bring coffee or a snack. Or like, I have cupcakes, so I'll give you one
All right,
at some
you can
point.
throw them at me.
But we have another guest coming up, and then Pete and I have a couple other topics we want to share with the group. And who knows what order all of these podcast episodes are going to come out in. So stay tuned.
Thank you for joining us, Mary.
Thanks, Mary. Anything you want to add?
No, thanks for having me.
Okay. Well, we'll have you back soon. signing off.